How's it going, everyone? Josh from Start Replay here again, bringing you another hardware review, and this time I'm reviewing the RAZER Raiju controller for the PlayStation 4. But first, let's take a quick snapshot of what's in the box. So in the box you have a welcome letter, some manuals, a 3-meter long cable, a carry case, the controller, and a small screwdriver for removing the back paddles. And here it is, the RAZER Raiju. I'm not going to be demonstrating it with the cable plugged in because it'll get a little bit fiddly. But let's get some base details out the way first. Now, opposite a standard DualShock 4 controller, which would cost around about, let's say, £40 to £45, the RAZER Raiju ain't cheap. It's £150. The Raiju is the most expensive PlayStation 4 controller on the high street today. I'm not including any of those silly gold-plated ones or the scuff gaming ones or any of the extra customizable ones. On the high street, this is the most expensive PlayStation 4 controller. So why should you spend £150 on the Raiju when for £40 to £45 you can pick up a typical DualShock 4? Well, this ain't no ordinary controller, and of course you probably know that if you've done any tiny bit of research already. The Raiju includes 4 customizable buttons. So you've got 2 extra bumper buttons at the top here, and then 2 triggers behind your fingers at the back. You might be asking yourself, how easy is it to map buttons? Well, it's incredibly easy. Just below the PlayStation button, you've got this button far left of the controller. Once you hold that down, you can then literally map pretty much any button bar the trackpad here to any of the extra 4 buttons that you have, M1, 2, 3 or 4. So if I hold that button down and press right on the D-pad and then press M4, that button would then be assigned to M4. But I could also use it normally on the face of the directional pad as well. That goes for anything else. If I wanted X on M1, then I'd hold down that button, press X, and then press M1. The controller would then vibrate, and you know it's done. It's that simple. One instance in which I altered a game's control scheme for the better was in Watch Dogs 2. Instead of having to press up on the D-pad to bring up my weapon wheel, which meant I'd have to stop moving and take my finger off the analog stick, I instead assigned it to my back left trigger, allowing me to move while I switch weapons for a much smoother and less frustrating experience. If you want more than one configuration of buttons and you're in the heat of a match and you want to change your tactics, then the button next to the one in which you press to customize the button configuration, you can then switch between 2 different profiles. Let's say on the first profile I have the run and crouch buttons assigned to the back triggers, but maybe I want to switch that around and instantly have, as well as run, I want maybe my melee attack. So if I want to knife someone quickly, I can then press that button, I'll have a whole different configuration on there, and you can change it so quickly and seamlessly. Going one step further for first-person shooters specifically, if you're shooting a gun, you want to shoot it pretty damn quick. You want to be the quickest out of everyone. Well, you can enable hair trigger mode on this controller, as well as locking out the 2 triggers at the top. So you have normal triggers there, lock them out, and then they stop a lot quicker. But with the hair trigger mode, if you hold down your button to configure buttons, hold down the back 2 triggers, and then press X, the controller will vibrate, and that means when you start to fire a gun, it'll just happen a lot quicker, opposite not having hair trigger mode on. If you want to turn it off, then you hold down the button to customize buttons, hold down the triggers and press circle, and instantly it's off. But that has really given me an edge when I'm playing Modern Warfare Remastered online, or Infinite Warfare, Battlefield, Titanfall. It's been, really handy. It's a bit cheeky, for people who maybe don't have hair trigger mode, but then again, I say, get a Raiju. Now, aside from all of that, you have, of course, got the typical aesthetic changes. You've got rubber grips, which are really grippy, as you'd expect, and the same go for the analog sticks, which come with these removable covers, which again mean if you are playing for a long time and your fingers or thumbs start to become a little bit sweaty, which, of course, come on, we've all experienced that, right? We're in our 5th, 6th hour of playing online. All of a sudden, it's a really tense match. Our fingers are slipping all over the place. You're going to want these on. But if you don't, just put them in the box or in the case. Lastly, in terms of base changes, of course, to the traditional DualShock 4, is the size of the Raiju. Now, this is a lot more similar to that of an Xbox One controller. The triggers, too, are incredibly similar to an Xbox One controller, and I like that. I prefer it because I've got big hands, so I've got a DualShock 4 here. If I hold the DualShock 4, it's a nice fit, but there are still large gaps around my hands. With the Raiju, I've got that really tight, snug fit, and especially when I'm playing first-person shooters, I want that grip. You know, I don't want anything to be loose. Then again, if you've got small hands, it's probably going to be a bit more cumbersome to you than it is to me. But yeah, it's actual size I prefer and I really, really like. Before I forget, I'm also going to show you me removing the back triggers, just so you can also see how that looks. As I said earlier in the unboxing, it comes with this tiny screwdriver. So let's just start unscrewing. That's one. That's two. All you do is press them down, and that's it. It's now flush at the back. So if your hands are getting a little bit annoyed with the extra buttons at the back and you keep pressing them by accident, then just take them off. So I think that's everything I need to cover on the front face of things. And now I'm going to go over my good points, the things that I think make this controller stand out especially from the DualShock 4. Now, of course, I've skimmed over the fact it's great to hold, and due to its added size, it means that I get a great amount of feedback through vibration. So if I'm doing driving games or FPS games, it's a little bit more immersive. Then again, if you're playing competitively, you'll probably want to turn off the vibration altogether to stop your hands shaking so much. Also, the actual build quality of the buttons, you get that nice feedback, you get that click. The closest thing I could compare it to is a mechanical keyboard. It's like having a mechanical keyboard but on a controller. Unless you hold one in your hands, it's hard to fully explain, but I like that. I was a bit hesitant at first about when you press a button, you have that click. But I got used to it, and having that feedback from buttons was really, really nice. And actually, the triggers, as I've explained, I prefer these triggers to the traditional DualShock because they're similar to Xbox ones, and your fingers just rest on them a bit more. And I like how they curve at the top, opposite a DualShock controller where they're a bit flatter. And yeah, to me, when you press down a trigger, a back trigger on a DualShock controller, you really get that thud at the end of pressing it down. But much like an Xbox One controller and the Raiju, you get sort of a softened end to the push of these triggers. And for some reason, it's just really comfortable. Another small but significant thing is the controls at the bottom of the controller, which allow you to quickly mute your audio and also adjust the volume. So if you have any headphones connected to the controller, they work perfectly fine. Of course, many people have already expensive wireless headphones, so you may not take advantage of that port if you have wireless headphones already. Then again, in a competitive way, if you're taking this controller to a friend's house or a tournament, you're not going to take your wireless headphones around with you everywhere you go. So then to have any set of headphones you've got in your pocket, just to bang them in there like I do with my Apple ones, and to have them work instantly, it's a great bonus. You may not be expecting me to say this, but my last and biggest plus point of the Raiju is the fact that it's a wired controller. Now, we all know how bad the battery life is on the wireless DualShock 4. It's terrible, and I've had many times when I'm playing online games and halfway through a match, my controller will start flashing and come up on screen saying, your battery's out, and before you know it, battery's gone, you need to plug it in. And unless you've got a 3-meter long micro USB cable, then you're screwed. You have to plug it into the console with a tiny cable or sit really close to it whilst you look up at the TV screen. With the length of this cable being 3 meters, you're not going to have that problem. For my living area, and I expect for most living areas, it's going to be absolutely fine. There's going to be more than enough cable there. and you're not going to have to charge it, which is fantastic. There were always going to be some, but here are my negatives about the Raiju controller. Of course, I said that I love it being a wired controller, and I do. But on the flip side of that, with it being wired, is you have a wire, and there's no ability to use this as a wireless controller. Again, I understand the need to have it wired for competitive gaming to reduce that latency. But if you just want to do some more casual gaming, you can't remove the cable and all of a sudden switch it to a wireless mode. You'd think it would be relatively easy, given the size of the controller, to put a rechargeable battery housing in here and to then put a wireless transmitter and then have it as a wireless controller, so people have the option. For the price of it being £150, I think that should have been mandatory. What's utterly perplexing to me, and this isn't Razer's fault, is the fact that this PlayStation button can't be used to turn on the console. You actually have to go up to your console and turn it on. Sony won't allow any third-party manufacturer of controllers to enable that function. I have no idea why. I will try and reach out to them for a comment as to why they do that. It's really stupid considering that Sony actually teamed up with Razer to make this controller. So yeah, it's not Razer's fault. It's nothing against Razer's production of the controller. It's just Sony's stupid rules. It's not necessarily a big thing for me, but the fact that I have my PlayStation behind a cover just means I have to take down the cover, turn it on, get back to my seat. And if you have big living rooms, it's just going to be even more of a pain, because if you have the controller there, you're just going to instinctively press the button and have it turn on, but it's not going to happen. You're going to have to go over there and walk the extra few steps. Now, of course, who doesn't like a good fighting game? I'm all up for a bit of Street Fighter or Tekken, but the D-pad, the directional pad on the Raiju, unfortunately isn't the best if you're doing any fighting games. And due to it being so mechanical in the way that you press it down, you can't really easily roll your thumb around it and get the range of movement that you might from other D-pads. And specifically, let's say the Microsoft Xbox One Elite controller, which I'll come on to in a second. On that D-pad, you can actually remove the housing entirely and put a little like roll around and lots of different configurations. Now, call me picky, but because this is a Razer product, I think it's missing one vital thing, and that's the chroma coloring, the style, the things that you see on the keyboards or some of the headsets. You have the logo in the center of the trackpad here. If Razer had made that logo translucent and get the color coming through from behind there, that would have looked awesome. It would have looked so cool, and it would have helped this controller stand out from the others on the market. Not that it doesn't already, because it certainly does, but to have some of that chroma color, that would have been great. When I look at ways to improve the Raiju, I don't have to look very far until I find probably what is the best customizable controller, moddable controller out there, and that's the Xbox One Elite controller. And of course, that's for Xbox only. You can't use it on the PlayStation. Now, bear in mind, I haven't had any hands-on time with the controller, but with the Elite controller, you can change the thumbsticks, you can change out the D-pad. It's not only customizable with buttons, but it's also moddable with the actual hardware configuration. After recording, it came to my attention just how much Scuf Gaming has added to their new range of controllers. Not only can you customize the buttons and style, but they too have added the ability to mod the thumbsticks, alongside a slew of other alterations. They may be quite a bit more expensive than the Raiju, but this is yet another example of what competitors are doing that Razer isn't. It's a bit of food for thought if Razer were to release a second Raiju in the future. Ever since the announcement of the Xbox One Elite controller, I've always wanted Sony to make a PlayStation alternative, something that PlayStation owners can have to match up with Xbox owners on the other side of the fence. And through their partnership with Nacon and Razer, I believe they've gone one major step forward in the right direction. Of course, Razer can learn quite a lot from the Xbox One Elite controller with moddable hardware, but for a Razer product, it's sturdy, comfortable, and easy to use. It might be pretty pricey at £150, I'm not denying that, but you really have to weigh up how much you want a competitive edge in your daily matches of Titanfall or Battlefield or Call of Duty. And I know I'd find it hard after trying this to live without it. So, yeah. You may have noticed that for recent pieces of hardware, I abolished a scoring system. But after much consideration and thought, I've come to the conclusion that I will once again score pieces of hardware, but we're not going to do it in the traditional out of 100% scoring system that we do game reviews. Instead, we're going to do it out of stars, out of 5 stars. And so starting with the Raiju, I give it a 3.5 star rating. I think it's a great controller. There are things that could be improved upon. Of course, moddable hardware would have made it amazing. It would have made it near perfect to match up to Xbox One's Elite controller. Who knows what will happen in the future, but as it stands, it is a great 3.5 stars from us. I hope you enjoyed this review as much as I did making it. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, give us a like, hit the comments below as well if you have any questions for me. And I'll catch you again soon.